Good morning, Boro fans. Today I bring news from Scotland. We officially moved up to Scotland 2 days ago. We are here in Aberdeen. Yeah, we've settled here in Aberdeen, and today I just kind of wanted to go over basically what's been in the news a lot lately and kind of just give my thoughts, my opinions on what I think will happen, what's been going on with everything. Hopefully you can see on screen here with everything in regards to Southampton and the playoff semi-final with Boro versus the Saints and Tonda Eckert and everything around the SpyGate scandal. Now, of course, unless you've been living under a rock for like the past week, you've probably heard something about SpyGate, whether it's through Sky Sports or Twitter or anywhere on social media. You've probably seen something about SpyGate. And for those that don't know, for those that haven't got any background, basically Southampton sent somebody, a staff member, down to Rockcliffe, which is Middlesbrough's training field, or training centre. So Southampton has sent down a staff member to basically spy on Middlesbrough's training session ahead of their playoff game. This is the first leg. So the first leg of the playoffs, Southampton had one of their staff come down, film, and basically get insider knowledge of what Middlesbrough were planning to do against Southampton in the playoff semi-final. So this is kind of what this has all been, circumstanced around and kick-started around. A lot of it is alleged. So, this could all be word of mouth, or this could be, something that's been going on and, maybe doesn't have any evidence. But listen, I'm a Boro fan. I'm Boro till I die. So I'm going to be with my club no matter what. And I have got my opinions on this. Southampton, as far as I'm aware, have admitted, to doing something. I don't know if it's exactly this, but they have accepted some charges made by the EFL. So there's clearly something going on. And according to social media sources as well as Sky Sports, a lot of this does come from Sky Sports, other clubs have now come forward to say that they feel like Southampton have done this in the past with their clubs. So this is why it's probably made such big headlines. If you don't know much about the cheating allegations and stuff, for those that do know, of course, Leeds were accused for doing this under Bielsa, and that was then a rule was implemented in place after Leeds were fined £200,000 to stop clubs from doing this again. There is a rule that you can't spy on a team within 72 hours of a match, and obviously they breached this rule, which is why it's gained the attention that it has, and since it was such an important game as well. When Leeds did it, like I said, it wasn't a playoff semi-final match. It wasn't a playoff final. It wasn't a important game. It was a typical league game. So with the factor of the caliber of game and the fact that it broke the rules, it's made the headlines well known in the football community. So to give you a little bit of information on my thoughts and everything surrounding this, I just want to say, first of all, I'm not here to attack any Southampton fans. I'm not here to attack any of the players, because penultimately it's out of their hands. It's nothing to do with the players. It's nothing to do with the fans. This is all purely on Eckhart, who you can see right here, the manager of Southampton. It's on Eckhart, and it's on the staff at Southampton. So if you are a Southampton fan and you have tuned in just to hear my thoughts on it, I respect you. I respect you for clicking on the video, and please just take into account, you're more than welcome to say whatever you want in the comments. And I try to read them all if I can. But I'm not here to attack you. I'm not here to offend any Southampton fans. I'm purely doing this purely off of my perspective as a Boro fan and what I think and what I feel. So, to get into things, like I said, I'm a Boro fan. I've been a Boro fan for coming up to nearly 2 decades, which is pretty incredible. I'm only 21. I've been supporting Boro since I was 4, and yeah, it's my club till I die. Honestly, I love my club. So where do I stand on this? Realistically, I think Southampton, Eckhart either needs to be fired. I know it seems harsh, but he did cheat, supposedly. I'm just going to hold my hands up. Supposedly, he did cheat. Eckhart, if found guilty, needs to be sacked by Southampton. They need a points deduction if they're promoted, or even if they're not, they need a points deduction for either the Championship or the Premier League, and for Boro to be compensated, I think is more than fair for this kind of situation. Do I think Southampton should be removed from the playoff final? No. Although they did beat us and they did cheat, supposedly. I'm going to have to keep saying supposedly. It's not official yet that they have cheated, but it's highly suspected that they have. I still found the playoffs to be pretty balanced, all in all. First leg, even though it ended 0-0, Boro had plenty of chances to win that game 4, maybe even 5-0. Dominated them the first half. Everybody says the second half was way more balanced. Even when you look at the stats, Boro still dominated them. In pretty much every area of the pitch. We just slowed down the tempo. We kind of went out the gates trying to get goals in the first half. It didn't work, so we slowed down the tempo, and that's why it looks like maybe Southampton dominated us a little bit more in the second half, but Boro had complete control of the full 90 minutes in that first leg. But as with pretty much all of our this season so far, we've just really struggled to put the ball in the back of the net, and a lot of people are going to put it down to Tommy Conway, but Tommy Conway's actually been shifted onto the left as a winger. So for all the Boro fans protecting David Strelic, who is our actual number 9 and has been consistently our number 9 since we signed him, you've got to look at somebody else to blame, because for the past few games Tommy's been playing absolutely amazing. His consistency, he runs for 90 minutes. He'll occupy many positions. Against Southampton, we're playing practically as a left wing back. He was covering left back, left mid, and the left wing. Even cut inside as a 9 and cut inside as a 10 as well. So I think Tommy gets way more stick than what he deserves. Strelic, I've already covered this on my podcast. So if you need to go and watch my thoughts, the podcast episode is up on the channel. If you want to go and watch that, that was just after the game. But I think you've got to look at Strelic, because in both those legs he looked really stiff. He couldn't turn the ball. He had many chances that he missed. His positioning was terrible. He just didn't really have an impact. So I think people need to lay off the stick with Tommy Conway and kind of focus it more to where it was deserved. Morgan Whittaker in that second leg looked pretty much invisible as well. It was like we had nothing, no threat at all. So it was a real shame. It was a real shame to see in that second leg that we struggled. We struggled. Ronnie McGree gave us our first goal, and then we just couldn't make an impact after that goal, which is a big shame. But to kind of get back on track and more about the scandal itself than the match, over the 2 legs, like I said, I think it was fairly balanced. So even though the point was that Southampton cheated, I think that they do deserve to go through to the playoff final. Hopefully Hull beat them. Not saying it to be salty or anything, but I really do hope Hull beat them. Hull deserve, to be in the Premier League. It was a really tight final day. We beat Wrexham, which allowed Hull to be promoted. I think Derby also lost as well, which helped Hull get promoted, because it was between those two if we managed to beat or draw against Wrexham. Because we drew 3-3, I believe it was 3-3, Was it 2-2? Might have been 2-2. I can't even remember the score, and it was only a few weeks ago. Just how much this scandal has kind of been the attention for us. But yeah, I think Hull deserve to go through. They've got Ryan Giles, Paddy McNair, and Matt Crooks. All three used to be Boro players, so I'd be really happy to see them go up if we aren't able to. Plus, my dad used to be a Hull fan. He said he was a Hull fan, but he's never been into football. So, he was born in Hull anyway. So I kind of grew up, knowing a little bit about the Tigers and stuff. So it would kind of feel better for me to see Hull go up rather than the Saints. I don't think the Saints deserve it. They've had a pretty mediocre season. I know Eckhart's come in and done a pretty good job with Southampton. Southampton looking like they were going to finish in the lower half of the table at the start of the season. Eckhart has come in and kind of revitalised it and kept their faith alive. So congrats to him. But I mean, you can't get into the playoffs, and then go ahead and cheat. Out the two matchups, you've got Millwall versus Hull and Middlesbrough versus Southampton. You knew that this was going to have the headlines. This was going to have the spotlight. I mean, it's the biggest of the two matchups. Nothing to take away from Hull and Millwall, but Middlesbrough versus Southampton has way more gravitas to it than Hull versus Millwall. This is two really big clubs in the Championship. So this was definitely going to have a lot of attention. So to cheat, allegedly, in a game of this calibre, I mean, you kind of deserve it, to have all this negative attention, especially if you thought you were going to get away with it as well. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's nothing us as the fans or the players can actually do about it. This is all now in the hands of the EFL and the FA, and between the club officials and all that. So it is what it is. But I've said what I think about it, what I think the punishment should be. But I just want to talk a little bit briefly on Eckhart. Tonda Eckhart, he always looks to me like, I've seen him in press conferences and on the pitch, he looks like the kind of man that's got a trick up his sleeve. He's always got some stern expression. He always looks like a very intimidating manager. And coming from somebody who coaches football, I do coach football. That is my job. I do coach football. It is youth development, but I still coach football. I know kind of what a good manager is versus a bad manager, or a manager who's approachable to one who's a bit more stern. I mean, if you look at an aggressive manager or somebody who's a little bit more strict, you look at the likes of Vincent Kompany. But even then, you look at Vincent Kompany and you can find dozen videos online of Vincent Kompany actually being a really down-to-earth, chill guy, even as a manager. You've got Diego Simeone, somebody I admire, is probably one of my biggest role models, biggest idols in terms of football management. Simeone looks like this really hard, strict guy, and yet you can actually find videos of him being a really sound guy. Eckhart to me just looks like he's aggressive and strict 24/7. I mean, watching the match back, even when he celebrated, he looked really aggressive. And him and Hellberg had an odd handshake in the first leg. Second leg handshake wasn't too bad. Kind of remind me of Tuchel and Conte when they had their little handshake bust up. Then there was some arguments on the sidelines. Not sure quite what happened there. It looked like the referee was coming over to talk about something. Something to do with Luke Ayling. I think it was Shea Charles as well. They had a little bit of a bust up. But Eckhart just lost it. He lost his cool, he lost his head, and he tried to push Hellberg, and he was mouthing off and everything. I'm always going to protect my manager. Kim Hellberg, stood on the sidelines. He looked angry, but he kept his composure. You know, he didn't lay hands on Eckhart like Eckhart did to him. You know, he wasn't trying to be aggressive. You know, he was just frustrated. But I know Saints fans are going to say opposite. You know, they're going to defend their club same way I'm defending mine. But realistically, Southampton showed everybody, you know, through there that they were the ones that were being aggressive. Even in the game, you know, there were so many times Middlesbrough got screwed over by the referee. You know, so many times Middlesbrough had things go against them. Southampton got awarded way too many free kicks, you know, for stuff that wasn't even a foul. I mean, Strelic gets tackled in the penalty box. It's not a foul, it's not a penalty, it's not a card. 2 minutes later, Riley McGree does the exact same tackle on Southampton. Riley McGree gets a yellow card. The exact same tackle for Riley McGree, and he gets booked for it. And yet Southampton players get away with it scot-free, and Boro get denied a penalty. Twice in the game, Southampton players, deliberate handball, clear as day, referee doesn't give it. Boro denied a penalty and I think a free kick as well. And then Southampton fans are like, oh, what about all the tackles on our players? The one with Dale Fry, you can argue he does catch his leg, so fair enough with that one. The one with Luke Ayling, it was a clean tackle. Don't try and argue. Watch the replay. It was a clean tackle. And by the way, the goal that you scored, the first goal, shouldn't have counted. And you know it shouldn't have counted because you pulled down Aidan Morris. Even watch it back, Aidan Morris gets pulled to the ground, which means he's not able to mark the man who eventually comes in and scores the goal. So, Southampton fans, you can have your opinion, and you can say you were equally, if not more, screwed over than Boro, but we just know that's not true. I mean, we knew from the first half that Boro were going to get screwed over. You know, we knew from the start we'd be in a battle with the referee. I mean, look how many cards we got compared to them. And if you actually watch the game back in full, you'd probably realise how unfair the referee was against Middlesbrough, and you know how easily he was showing us cards compared to them. I think Southampton walked away with like 2 cards, and Boro walked away with like 5 or 6. You know, it was absolutely disgraceful. Plus, the only reason Southampton had like 1 or 2 is because one of them was to their keeper for time wasting. And while I get on the topic of the time wasting, without trying to go on a rant, their ball boy was holding the ball, to a Boro player, you know, who was just trying to take a throw in, and their ball boy was refusing to hold the ball to waste time. And then Aidan Morris comes over, grabs the ball off him, and all the Southampton players bloody surrounding Morris like he was the one that did something wrong. And it's like, Morris did nothing wrong there. It was your ball boy who was holding the ball. You know, he was holding on to the ball, wasting time, and Morris just came over and just took the ball off him. You know, it's not like he didn't do a hazard. You know, he didn't push him on the floor and stamp on him. All he did was he took the ball out of his hands. And yet Southampton players coming round him, surrounding him, like he bloody punched the kid or something. Plus the kid looked like he was like 25. I don't know where they've been finding these bloody mascots, but yeah, it was super dodgy. Even the commentators were saying that guy should have been kicked out because he was holding on to the ball, and yet he was still there in the second half. So Southampton, you know, you can back your club as much as you want, but the evidence is there, like the full match. You know, you can go back and watch it. I'm not saying Middlesbrough were clean. You know, I'm not saying we didn't deserve, you know, a lot of the fouls that we committed. You know, you definitely had a lot of set pieces, a lot of opportunities from fouls that we committed, but we were definitely screwed over harsher than you guys were. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you went through, we didn't. You know, you can say you were the better side, but you weren't the better side. You just got lucky through set pieces. We beat you 4-0 in the season. You know, we dominated you in the first leg, and then you were able to get a win in the second. To kind of finish a bit on the scandal, I just kind of wanted to talk about kind of what the suspected thing around it was Middlesbrough apparently had come up with a plan to kind of crowd or silence Finn Azaz. Finn Azaz, for those that don't know, used to play for Boro, and then he transferred to Southampton, so he knew kind of how Boro were going to play. So we had basically an idea, supposedly, to crowd Finn Azaz, make it a lot harder for Southampton to utilise their playmaker, because we know Finn Azaz is very good at shooting, he's very good at passing. Like that goal he scored against Man City, I mean, applauded that Finn. That was an absolutely amazing goal. Still watch it over and over. It was incredible. The turn straight into the finish. It was brilliant goal, brilliant finish. But yeah, so we tried to crowd Finn Azaz, but they saw it coming because they had inside information, and basically it just allowed them, it gave them an advantage over us, which is why it's deemed unfair and cheating. So this has been my thoughts on SpyGate, on the SpyGate scandal. A few of my thoughts on the matter. I mean, there's always going to be people that are going to be like, you're absolutely wrong, Southampton did nothing wrong, this is all alleged, you can't talk about stuff that's alleged like it's true. There's always going to be people like that, but realistically you've got to ask yourself, if it was Middlesbrough that had been under this scrutiny, if it was Middlesbrough that were convicted or have been, supposedly convicted of cheating, would you realistically be doing the same? And likely, you probably would be. You'd be making videos, you'd be making comments saying, we demand justice, we want this, we want that. So you've got to ask yourself, as Southampton fans, before you scrutinise me, before you go on your rants about all this stuff, honestly ask yourself, would you be doing the same if it was Middlesbrough that apparently had cheated you out of your potential shot at getting promoted to the Premier League? Anyway, I'm going to leave it there before I go on a massive rant and say some stuff that I don't want out there on YouTube. I've been Cal Owen. This has been the Riverside Review and Up the Borough, as per usual. Bring on next season.